My phone buzzed at 7:43 on a Tuesday morning. Just a text. But it changed everything. We need space. Don't reach out. I stared at the screen, my coffee going cold in my hand. It was from my mother. I read it again, waiting for context, waiting for an explanation that never came. Then I saw it. Stephanie had liked the message. My sister. Liking a text that cut me out of our family. I opened my mother's Instagram before I could stop myself. Photos from the night before. A birthday party at Cherry Hill Country Club. Catered food. Live music. My father in the background toasting with wine. My mother glowing in the center of it all, surrounded by smiling faces. None of them were mine. I hadn't been invited. Not a call. Not even a courtesy text. Just silence and then this. The hurt hit in waves. I'd spent 15 years funding this family. 15 years of checks and wire transfers and midnight conversations with accountants. I'd paid for that vacation house they loved. I'd covered Stephanie's bills when she couldn't be bothered to work. I'd kept them afloat while I worked myself to exhaustion. And this was how they thanked me. I set the phone down and tried to breathe. Growing up in Cherry Hill wasn't cheap. And my father made sure we all knew it. Charles was a real estate investor who loved the spotlight, country club dinners, charity galas, the kind of man who measured success in Mercedes and vacation homes. My mother, Carol, thrived on that world. She planned events, attended luncheons, and kept our name in the local society pages. Then there was Stephanie, 3 years older, who'd never held a job longer than 6 months. My parents treated her like she was building something extraordinary just by existing. A new hobby? Praise. A weekend trip? No questions asked. My father would write checks without blinking. I was the one who actually built something. Medical school. Residency. Surgery. 12-hour shifts saving lives. But somehow, in their eyes, I was the ambitious one. The cold one. The one who didn't understand family. What they meant was I wasn't playing the game anymore. It started small when I finished my training. My mother called one afternoon, her voice light and expectant. Isabella, can you cover the property taxes for the Jersey Shore house? It's just temporary. Temporary turned into permanent. Every year another $60,000. Then came the utilities, the maintenance. My father's business wasn't doing as well as he claimed, so I covered the gaps. Stephanie needed rent money, and my parents couldn't spare it, so I paid. Every request came with the unspoken rule. Don't question it. Don't say no. I told myself it was my role. I was the successful one. If I could keep the family stable, maybe they'd finally see me the way they saw Stephanie. Maybe my father would stop dismissing my surgical achievements with a thin smile. Maybe my mother would post about my work instead of Stephanie's latest whim. Over 15 years, I poured nearly $500,000 into their lives. And they still treated me like I was missing something essential, some quality that made Stephanie special and me just reliable. It wasn't until Julie said something at the hospital that I let myself see it clearly. We were scrubbing out after a long surgery, and she looked at me with that direct way she had. Isabella, your family's using you. You know that, right? I wanted to argue. Instead, I stayed quiet. That night, I went home and pulled up the family accounts. The numbers stared back at me like an accusation. $155,000 last year alone. My year. All from my surgery income. Stephanie didn't work. My parents were spending like money grew on trees, and I was the one holding it all together. I scheduled a session with the therapist, Dr. Pamela King. I showed her the numbers. I told her about the family dinners where my achievements went unmentioned, while Stephanie's half-finished projects were celebrated like miracles. I told her about the text messages asking for money, the casual expectation that I'd always say yes. Dr. King didn't soften it with kind words. She held up a mirror instead. Your family sees you as a provider, not a person, she said. And you've been accepting that role because you're hoping it will eventually earn you their love. It won't. The words landed like a punch. That summer, everything exploded. I drove to my parents' house for a family dinner, hoping that maybe finally we could have a real conversation. Instead, I walked into a minefield. My father had just bought a new Mercedes. My mother was showing off blueprints for a $70,000 kitchen renovation. They were spending money they didn't have, and I knew it. I'd been quietly covering their debt for years. We sat at the mahogany table, my mother's crystal wine glasses catching the chandelier light. Stephanie scrolled on her phone, barely present. "Isabella," my father said, clearing his throat, "we need to talk about the house. The renovation's going to cost more than we planned. Can you chip in another $20,000? I set down my fork. $20,000 on top of everything else. On top of the $60,000 a year I already paid for that house. On top of Stephanie's rent. On top of their club memberships. I'm already covering a lot," I said carefully. "The vacation home. Stephanie's bills. Your expenses. I can't keep adding more." My father's face hardened. "You're a surgeon, Isabella. You can afford it." Stephanie looked up from her phone, smirking. "It's just $20,000. What's the big deal?" Then she said it. The thing that broke something open in me. "Speaking of money, I've got this amazing idea for a boutique. High-end fashion. Exclusive. I need you to invest. $50,000 to start." I stared at her. Stephanie, who'd never finished anything. Stephanie, who'd flunked a business class in college. Stephanie, who'd never paid a bill on time in her life, thought she could run a store. "Stephanie, that's too risky," I said quietly. "You don't have any experience." Her face flushed. "You don't believe in me." "It's not about belief. It's about numbers. Most boutiques fail." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Don't talk to us like that. Stephanie's got vision. Maybe you could learn something from her." "Learn from her." The words echoed like a slap. My mother's voice went sharp. "Why can't you support your sister? You're always so rigid, Isabella. You don't understand family." I felt something shift inside me. 15 years of checks. $500,000. Sleepless nights. And this is what I got. This is what I'd always get. "I'm not funding the boutique," I said firmly. "It's not happening." My mother gasped. "How dare you?" I left that night feeling more alone than I'd ever felt. Driving back to my apartment, I replayed every conversation, every moment they dismissed me, every time they'd chosen Stephanie, every time they'd taken my money for granted. 2 weeks later, the text came. When I read those words, "We need space. Don't reach out," something inside me finally broke free. They wanted space. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to celebrate without me and ignore me when it was convenient. Fine. By midnight, I'd made my move. I called Stephen Reed, a financial advisor, and we went through every account. The trust I'd been managing for years. The property deed with my name on it. Every dollar I'd contributed. "You've been funding this alone," Stephen said, reviewing the numbers. "Protect yourself." I froze the family trust. I transferred its management to a professional firm. I contacted Christine Gray, a real estate lawyer, and listed my share of the Jersey Shore house for sale. I canceled every automatic payment. No more rent for Stephanie. No more utilities for my parents. No more covering their world. By 4:25 a.m., my phone was exploding. 36 missed calls. My father's voicemail was sharp and panicked. My mother's was softer, more manipulative. Stephanie's was pure venom. I didn't answer any of them. What they didn't know was what I'd just done. What they didn't understand was that I'd finally stopped playing a game I never wanted to play. And the real consequences were just beginning. The silence after I froze the accounts was deafening. For 3 days my phone stayed quiet. Then it started. My father called at 7 a.m. on a Thursday, his voice sharp and controlled. "What the hell have you done? Unfreeze that trust. Now. I didn't answer. My mother's messages shifted from confusion to desperation. Isabella, please. We can't understand why you're doing this. We're family. Each word was carefully chosen, designed to pull at guilt I'd spent years nurturing. Stephanie's came in waves. First angry. You're selfish. You're ruining everything. Then desperate. Mom and Dad are freaking out. Can we please just talk? Then vicious again. You think you're better than us because you have money. You're pathetic. I read them all and felt nothing. Dr. King's voice echoed in my head. You can't change them. You can only change how you respond. By the end of the week, Stephanie did something I should have seen coming. She posted on social media a long rambling caption with a photo of herself and my parents, all smiles, all carefully lit. Some people think they're better than their family because they make money. Don't be fooled by my sister's success. She's heartless. She's abandoned us when we needed her most. Real family doesn't turn their back on people who love them. Real family doesn't weaponize their wealth. I just wanted her to believe in me, and instead she destroyed us. The post had hundreds of likes within hours. People I didn't know were commenting, sharing it, piling on. My colleagues saw it. My hospital had to field calls about me. I called Christine, my lawyer. It's nasty, Christine said calmly. But it's not defamation. It's just family drama going public. Stay focused on what matters. What mattered was that I'd stopped being their ATM. What mattered was that I could finally breathe. The Jersey Shore house sold within 3 weeks. I netted $220,000 from my share. My parents sold the rest to cover debts, and most of that money disappeared to creditors. The house they'd bragged about for 20 years was gone. I heard about it through a mutual friend. My father had always treated that house like a crown jewel, proof of his success. Now it was just another asset liquidated to cover the gap I used to fill. My mother's messages became almost unrecognizable. Isabella, we're struggling. We can't pay the bills. Please just come talk to us. We miss you. My father shifted between pleading and threats. You owe this family. Don't make this worse. Then when that didn't work, I'll sue you for mismanaging the trust. I have lawyers. Christine laughed when I told her that. Sue you for what? You managed it perfectly. You have documentation for everything. He has nothing. Stephanie took a job at a clothing store. A mutual acquaintance mentioned it casually. Stephanie working retail, folding sweaters, ringing up purchases. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being supported. She was working 40 hours a week and paying her own rent. Part of me felt a flicker of respect for that. But it didn't erase what she'd done. Her social media posts calling me heartless still lived on the internet, shared by strangers, defining me to people I'd never met. We didn't speak. I had no intention of reaching out. My parents did what they could to survive. The Mercedes went back to the dealership. They traded it for a used sedan, practical and forgettable. My mother's event planning business had dried up. No one wanted to hire someone who couldn't afford her own parties. My father, who'd thrived on his reputation as a successful investor, was just another retiree now, watching his carefully constructed image crumble. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel joy at their struggle. But I didn't feel guilty either. They'd made their choices just like I'd made mine. The calls and texts continued for weeks, gradually becoming less frequent. By the second month, they'd almost stopped. The anger had faded into something quieter. Acceptance, maybe, or exhaustion. I didn't answer any of them. 3 months after I froze the trust, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd thought about them. I'd thrown myself into work at the hospital. I took on a new research project studying spinal injury recovery. I started mentoring younger surgeons, teaching them not just technique, but the discipline of listening to your instincts. I even developed a class for medical students on ethical decision-making. For the first time, my work wasn't something I was doing to prove myself. It was something I loved. Outside the hospital, I built a life that was mine alone. I ran in the mornings, watching the city wake up. I had dinner with friends, real friends, people who wanted to know me, not what I could give them. I learned to cook properly, without the rush of someone else's emergency hanging over me. I saved money not for my family but for myself. A down payment on a small apartment I loved. Furniture I chose. Art on the walls because I wanted it there. I wasn't lonely. I was whole. One afternoon, I ran into Julie at the hospital. She smiled when she saw me, that sharp, knowing smile. "You look different," she said. "Lighter." "I set boundaries," I said. "Good. They needed setting." She was right. I'd spent so many years trying to earn love through financial sacrifice. I'd believed that if I gave enough, stayed strong enough, was useful enough, they would finally see me. They would finally choose me. But they'd never been choosing me. They'd been choosing what I could provide. When I stopped providing, I stopped existing to them. The realization didn't hurt anymore. It was just the truth, clean and simple. I thought about Stephanie sometimes. I wondered if she was happy working retail, if there was some small satisfaction in earning her own way. I wondered if my parents had found peace in their smaller life, without the pressure to maintain an image they couldn't afford. I wondered if they ever thought about the bridge they'd burned. It didn't matter. That bridge was ash now. Some things can't be rebuilt and some people aren't worth the effort. What mattered was that I'd chosen myself. I'd protected my worth by refusing to let it be measured in dollars. I'd walked away from a dynamic that was slowly killing me, one check at a time. Looking back at who I was before, the surgeon who came home exhausted and checked her phone for messages asking for money, who attended family dinners hoping this time would be different, who believed that one more sacrifice would finally make them proud, I barely recognized her. That woman was drowning. This one could breathe. If you've ever set a boundary with family, you know how the guilt tries to pull you back. How the voice in your head whispers that maybe you were too harsh, that blood is supposed to mean something, that you should be the bigger person. I heard that voice too. I still do sometimes late at night. But then I remember what Dr. King told me. You can't change people who don't want to change. And you don't have to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. My parents didn't change. They adapted, downsized, and accepted a life smaller than the one they'd built on my back. Stephanie stepped up in a way I never thought she would. But that didn't erase the public betrayal or the years of entitlement. And me? I learned that I was enough. Not because of what I could do for others, but just because I was. The money I used to send them now funds my future. The hours I used to spend managing their accounts now go to research that might help paralyzed patients walk again. The emotional energy I wasted hoping for their approval now goes into mentoring young doctors and building a life that's actually mine. Boundaries aren't cruel. They're survival. They're the moment you stop disappearing and start becoming visible to yourself. That text, "We need space. Don't reach out," was meant to hurt me. And it did. But it also freed me. It was the line drawn in the sand that I'd been too afraid to draw myself. I gave them the space they asked for, more than they bargained for. And in that space I finally found myself.